Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Willow Creek Reservoir near the Sun River in Teton County, Montana. The river is a classic Montana prairie river with slow currents that form oxbows, granting fly fishermen promising fishing holes to cast their flies in pursuit of rainbow trout. The elevation is high at around 4,000 feet, and the banks of the river are lined with cottonwood and willow stands, creating a picturesque beauty not offered by many other locations. About 20 miles upstream, the Sun River starts in the Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex, which preserves 1.5 million acres of forest and is comprised of the Bob Marshall Wilderness Area, the Scapegoat Wilderness Area, and the Great Bear Wilderness Area. Legislation passed in 1964 set it aside to preserve its wild character and habitat. This wilderness complex has always been a stronghold of grizzly bears, and now the massive predators have moved down from the mountains and settled into the riparian zones along the Sun River. When examined by satellite image, the area around Willow Creek Reservoir looks like one of the least likely places you'd find grizzly bears. The high plains with their rolling hills of sagebrush don't seem to provide any food for the big bears, but looks can be deceiving, and grizzly bears are always surprising. On the weekend of Sunday, May 17, 2020, Matthew Churchman, his wife Laura, and their daughter Ella were enjoying a fly fishing trip with Blackfoot River Outfitters. Matthew worked for the company and managed their shop in Missoula. Along with the Churchmans were the company owner, John Herzer, and his companion, Terry Raugland. The group had picked up another couple, Lisa, and her companion, whom we'll call Scott, which rounded out their fishing expedition at 7 people in total. The expedition had floated down the Sun River for a few days, catching trout and enjoying the peace and quiet for which the area is known. By Sunday, they had woken up and devoured breakfast and gulped down warm coffee before packing their gear into rafts for another day's float. It may have been the coffee, but before launching the boats, Matthew felt the call of nature. He walked a few yards into the willows to relieve himself. At about 35 yards to his right, Raugland was beginning to put her waders on and saw some movement in the brush a little less than 20 yards away. As she searched the bushes, she could see the form of a grizzly bear materialize, seemingly out of nowhere. The bear wasn't looking toward Raugland or any of the campers. It was walking right through camp and seemed blissfully unaware of the people only a few yards away. She knew this could be a dangerous situation, and the others needed to be alerted in a manner that didn't startle the grizzly. Raugland barked out, "Bear!" intended to be loud enough for the other people to hear, but not loud enough to alarm the grizzly. As Churchman was relieving himself, a grizzly leisurely strolled 12 yards in front of him. It hadn't seen him, and he was hoping it wouldn't. Guided by a primordial need to alert his companions, Churchman yelled out, "Bear!" and instinctively reached down to his belt for his bear spray, which had been placed into the gear pile to be loaded onto the boats. Raugland and Churchman's alerts rang out a split second apart, and both of them looking in different directions. Herzer was sharing a tent with Raugland and was a little over 20 yards behind her and about 25 yards behind Churchman. As an avid archery hunter, Herzer knew this was a very dangerous situation in which the group had found themselves. After yelling out, Churchman watched the sow grizzly turn her head in his direction. She barked a loud woof in alarm to his presence. The sow grizzly approached and attacked Churchman so quickly that he later likened it to being inside a giant hairy washing machine. Herzer watched as the grizzly closed the 12 yards between herself and Churchman. She didn't slow down as she got to him, slamming into him like an out-of-control vehicle. The impact of the bear sent Churchman flying backward, and as soon as he landed, he rolled onto his stomach and covered his neck with his hands to protect himself. Just to alleviate a little confusion, there were 2 grizzly bears involved. The sow was walking about 70 yards behind her cub. Raugland saw the 3-year-old cub first, and Churchman saw the sow. After plowing into Churchman, Herzer watched as the sow became a frenzy of snapping jaws and swiping paws. He thought that the sow was certainly going to kill Churchman, given the ferocity of her attack. The group had brought along 7 canisters of bear spray, which were all in some state of being packed for the float. There was no mention of anyone carrying a firearm, so it's assumed they didn't bring one. Without anything to defend himself, Herzer began running toward the bear as it attacked Churchman. All of his attention was focused on the grizzly, so he failed to see a willow root protruding from the ground. It tripped him up, sending him sprawling onto his face. Herzer didn't stay down long, though. In a flash, he was back up on his feet, sprinting toward the grizzly again, waving his arms and yelling. As he approached the grizzly, he remembered thinking to himself, "Okay, time to share the pain," as he completed what was the human version of a bluff charge. His options raced through his mind. Should I punch it or kick it? Finally deciding he would leap onto its back and try to distract it from killing Churchman, Herzer closed to within 5 yards. Just then something unexpected happened. The sow's head snapped in Herzer's direction. He must have seemed confusing and strange to her, with his yelling and waving his arms. She spun a few quick circles before disappearing back into the bushes, leaving a cloud of dust where she stood. Still jacked up on adrenaline, Herzer ran up to Churchman's side as he lay face down on the ground. There was no way he could have survived this, and Herzer prepared himself to see Churchman's horrific injuries. He wondered how to break the news to Churchman's wife and daughter, who nervously stood by only a few yards away. Placing his hands on Churchman's back, Herzer felt him inhale and exhale. He was breathing. Looking over Churchman's neck and head allayed more of his fears. He couldn't see any terrible gashes or crushed tissues. The signs so far were positive, until he could see a growing pool of blood on the ground beneath Churchman's face. Herzer tried to get Churchman to roll over so he could inspect his injuries. Fearful the bear had crushed his friend's face or swiped away part of his head, Herzer coaxed Churchman into rolling over, despite his objections. Churchman told him that the bear had bitten his stomach, and if he rolled over his guts might fall out. Finally giving in, Churchman revealed the gashes to his belly. The bear's teeth had torn through the skin and fat layers beneath it, but had somehow missed cutting further into his abdomen. His head had a big gash across the side of it, and it was the source of the blood pooling beneath him. Herzer knew that they had to get Churchman to medical attention right away. He ran to the rafts and started preparing a makeshift bed out of sleeping bags and pads on which to lay Churchman. Herzer watched Churchman as he began to sink into shock and had to fight it as well. As Herzer prepared the raft for Churchman, Lisa ran over and imparted some sound advice. She told him that Churchman may have internal injuries, and moving him could be very dangerous for him. She'd been trained in wilderness medicine and had a fully stocked first aid kit. Lisa brought organization to the panicked chaos. She directed Raugland to stand guard with one of the bear spray canisters, just in case the grizzlies returned. While Lisa took care of Churchman and Herzer, Scott grabbed Herzer's cell phone and ran to a small rise just above the riverbank, hoping to contact 911 dispatch for Teton County. 2 bars suddenly appeared on Herzer's cell phone screen, allowing just enough reception to complete the call. The 911 dispatcher ordered game wardens and a medical helicopter from Augusta to converge from 3 different directions on the location. The Mercy Flight helicopter service didn't have a pinpoint location, so they flew up the Sun River, searching for the victims. In what seemed like hours, but in reality was only 15 to 20 minutes, a helicopter landed on a small clearing on a nearby gravel bar. Medics hustled to Churchman's side and lifted him onto a litter to load him on the helicopter. As soon as he was aboard, a fentanyl drip caused the pain and shock to give way to an unfocused peace. The medical helicopter could fly Churchman out, but none of the others in the party. They quickly jumped into their boats and rowed for 12 hours to reach their departure point. After being admitted to the emergency room, Churchman's injuries were examined. The gash in his head was closed with sutures, as well as the punctures in his abdomen. Somehow none of his injuries were life-threatening. He was released to heal at home within 24 hours of admittance. Churchman's attack occurred during the height of the COVID lockdowns, so his wife and daughter were not allowed to visit him very much. Laura stated that one thing she'd learned from this bear attack is that her husband is very strong and gets stronger each day. Regarding the grizzly bears, officials determined that the sow's behavior was within expected behavior of a sow grizzly protecting herself and her cub from a perceived threat. No action was taken against her or her cub. About a month before Churchman's grizzly bear attack, on April 8, 2020, the first grizzly attack of the year occurred when a DuPayer resident was mauled a short distance from his house. After enduring the attack, he limped home and sought medical treatment for his injuries. His attack reveals important insights into how to defend yourself from a grizzly bear attack, and will be featured on our next episode, so make sure to catch it. Pictures of Churchman's injuries would not pass YouTube guidelines, so I've posted them on my Patreon page linked below. The Cub tier membership is only $3 a month, and your generosity goes a long way to helping creating content for scary bear attacks. After reviewing the details of this attack, I'm left with a few questions for you. Are you surprised to hear of a grizzly bear attack in such an unexpected location? How did the sow and her cub wander so closely to the fishing camp and not know they were there? Do you think this attack would have happened if Churchman and Raugland had remained quiet? The next time you are in the woods and have to relieve yourself, will you be packing your bear spray or a firearm? I think I'll give it a shot. I'll gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to Hallsbrook Road in North Groton, New Hampshire. It is a small town tucked away in the woods about 50 miles north of Concord, and it's just south of the White Mountains. The rolling hills are around 1,300 feet in elevation and are covered with stands of pine, fir, and cedar, as well as elm, ash, maple, and birch trees. The mixed hardwood forests offer breathtaking views each fall, and their beautiful green leaves shade the forest floor all summer. Here white-tailed deer and moose mosey among the forests and meadows, as bobcats, coyotes, and black bears stalk the trails and shadows. The black bears stalk much more than the shadows around North Groton. They've been known to stalk the decks, patios, and backyards of residents, especially of those who have bird feeders. Not only are they known to be fond of bird food, but they also approach some homes that have dog or cat food left outside. Local television stations have interviewed residents who have observed bears on their decks and through patio doors. Some of them have indicated that they take in their bird feeders each night to make sure the bears aren't encouraged to come around. April Rogers was a retired 71-year-old woman who lived by herself off of Hallsbrook Road. Her health had taken a hit the last few months, and she had been relegated to a wheelchair while she recovered. Due to limited mobility, she sometimes had a hard time taking care of things around her house. On the side of her home, she had a screen door that sometimes slipped her mind before she retired for the night. On the evening of July 16, 2018, April went to bed, leaving her door open, with the screen door shut to allow the cool air of the evening into her home. At around 1 a.m., April woke up to the sound of her pantry doors in the kitchen being opened and shut. She could hear shuffling across the floor and knew that she'd better check and see what was going on. As April rounded the kitchen corner, she saw an enormous black bear standing at her kitchen counter, facing her cupboards as it searched for food. She was immediately terrified and decided to yell at the bear to scare it away. Being familiar with local bears and having never had one wait around long enough to concern her, she expected it to flee in panic at her presence. After April yelled at the bear, it turned and looked at her and slowly stepped in her direction. She knew she had to remain calm so that her heart wasn't stressed out. She approached a kitchen chair and sat down, lifting her hands to the side of her head to help her calm herself. That is when the black bear did something very unusual. April was only a few yards from him, and he took a few steps across her kitchen and sat down right in front of her. She was surprised to see the bear do this, but was just as confused when it started to swing its head from side to side. April started to pick up on the idea that the bear was very tense and anxious with her presence. As the bear's head swung to the left, April's vision was filled with the sight of a massive bear paw with its claws sharply aimed, traveling toward her face too quickly for her to get out of the way. With a single swat of its massive paw, the bear sent April spilling onto the floor and into unconsciousness. When she came to, April knew that if she lay there, she would die from her wounds. She scrambled across the floor of her kitchen in search of her phone as blood poured from her head and face. April dialed 911 at 1:15 a.m. and contacted emergency services, who dispatched a police officer and an ambulance to her location. While she was on the phone, the bear dashed from room to room, looking for a way out. April screamed at the bear, hoping it would drive the bear away from her and her home. Only a few minutes after the bear squeezed out the screen door, April heard a knock at the front entrance. The authorities had arrived just after the bear had fled her home and escaped into the woods. First responders could see the left side of her face deeply gashed along her cheek, jaw, and scalp. The injuries they could not see and would later be revealed by X-ray examination at Spear Hospital in Plymouth, where that April's neck and facial bones had also been shattered. This revelation led to her being transferred to Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center for more intensive medical support. By around 10 a.m., she was undergoing the first of several surgeries to treat her wounds and fractures, with the initial surgery lasting for 6 hours. In only 2 swipes from its powerful paws, the bear almost tore April's left side of her face off, eventually costing her left eye, which was surgically removed in a later operation. Following her attack, authorities launched an extensive search for the brazen and dangerous bear. They were concerned it may decide to attack another person, or that it may have rabies. Canine teams were brought to April's property to track down the bear, but a heavy rainstorm washed away the scent trail, preventing the apprehension and identification of the aggressive bear. April stated that she was happy that the bear wasn't apprehended and euthanized. She commented that the bear was just being a bear, and all she wanted to do was to return to her home to heal. After April's home invasion and attack, New Hampshire Fish and Game officials issued incredible statements. They stated that they weren't considering the incident a bear attack because the bear wasn't necessarily acting aggressively. Astoundingly, they claimed it was just a case of April being at the wrong place at the wrong time. I have to ask, if a human is in their home and runs into a bear invading their home in search of food, how can this be misconstrued as the person being in the wrong place at the wrong time? It is a logic that defies reason, in my opinion. In an amazing counter to hazing programs, projects like the New Hampshire Wildlife Coalition have issued flyers on how residents can report hound hunters pursuing bears in the pursuit season, which runs from July 1st through the end of August. Bear take or harvest season starts September 1st and extends through November 9th. The coalition advises residents on understandable issues like preventing trespassing on private property, but neglects to note that bears do not respect private property signs, and hounds can't read, so neither bears nor hounds will change their intrusive behavior because of posted signs. They do not offer a caution to landowners to avoid setting out bird feeders or other attractants to keep from drawing bears to private property in the first place. I've linked to the information in the video article below for your consideration. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Why did the bear sit down next to April and wave its head back and forth before swatting her? Did the bear consider April competition for its food supply, or was it defending itself from what it viewed as a threat? What more could April have done to avoid this attack? Would you be brave enough to confront a noise from your kitchen at 1 a.m.? April is braver than I am, there's no doubt about that. I'll gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the small town of Tatlayoko Lake and the agricultural area around it in central British Columbia, Canada. The elevation in the valley bottom is about 3,000 feet, and the peaks around climb to around 9,000 feet high. The climate here is a continental climate, which is characterized by dramatic seasonal changes. Each season here is pronounced, with long, cold, snowy winters and warm, dry, short summers. The steep hillsides are adorned with resilient stands of subalpine fir, Douglas fir, and lodgepole pine, with pine grass, prickly rose, and Canada buffalo berry, creating moderately dense ground cover and seasonal food sources. The Tatlayoko Valley has a seasonal salmon run that provides important nutrients to many plants and animals in the area. The nitrogen and other nutrients deposited by the dead salmon support a healthy habitat for mule deer, moose, as well as mountain goats and California bighorn sheep on the ridges. The bushes rustle with beautiful songbirds, and waterfowl bob along most bodies of water. With abundant game animals, predators are numerous and include bobcats, Canadian lynx, coyotes, gray wolves, cougars, as well as black bears and grizzly bears. This broad ecosystem is vibrant, and human guests enter a dangerous place at their own peril. An interesting bit of information about black bears in British Columbia is in order to understand the events that surround this episode. Although the area has a seasonal salmon run and abundant berries and other food sources, black bears are not the apex of the food chain here. They do feed on salmon when they're not chased away by grizzly bears, but that goes with every food source as well. With 119 grizzlies roaming the Tatlayoko Valley, black bears are always wary and alert. Protective sow grizzlies have been known to kill black bears on sight in order to ensure their cubs' survival. Boar grizzlies kill and eat adult black bears if they cannot run them out of desired territory. Being the second-tier predator, black bears here have to consider any food source they come across. On July 14, 1996, 53-year-old cattle rancher Sven Sater was doing what he loved, taking care of his ranch. On top of the regular chores of herd maintenance and vet visits, Sven had to involve himself with his cattle herd in the open rangelands. This involved saddling up his horse and riding for miles through the brush and forests, ensuring his fences were intact. As Sven led his horse through the trees, he searched out his herd and examined the range for anything that might be harmful to them. His horse was a great way to navigate the tough territory and allowed him to see his surroundings clearly. Sven would stop periodically and make repairs to fences and continue on his way afterward. He and his horse walked the trails, unaware they were being followed by a dangerous visitor with deadly intentions. Back at the ranch, several hours had passed and Sven hadn't returned. His family grew concerned and notified authorities of his absence. His rangeland was known, and that is where they anticipated he would be. There are many things that can happen when riding a horse, and even Sven wasn't immune to those risks. Hoping his horse may have come up lame, or he'd found one of his cattle injured, they launched a search party to find him the next morning. They picked up Sven's horse tracks and followed them into the rangeland, but soon noticed an alarming set of tracks merging with Sven's. The indelible tracks of a very large black bear paralleled Sven's horse tracks, then converged with them. The bear's tracks were over his horse tracks, proving that the bear was following them and not simply using the trail before them. The searchers continued to follow Sven's horse tracks for nearly a half-mile before a large black bear charged them from the brush, then peeled off and disappeared. Hoping the bear was only surprised, they waited to see if it had fled. The bear had circled around and was now chuffing and growling at them from the brush, indicating it was defending something. There were no cubs scampering up trees, so what the bear was protecting became an alarming concern. As they examined the brush, they could see the bear standing near a cache of some sort. Due to the bear's aggressive behavior and the fact that Sven was missing, they shot that bear so they could continue with their search. Having dispatched the bear, searchers approached the cache site. Beneath the debris and sticks, they could see Sven's corpse. It had been partially consumed. Now aware that they had a human fatality on their hands, they cordoned off the area to preserve the evidence until investigators arrived. The forensics team used the track evidence to help them understand what had transpired that led to Sven's death and consumption. They could see the bear's tracks had closed to within a few yards after following the horse for a half-mile. As the bear burst from the brush, Sven's horse spun to the left and his saddle rolled on the horse's back. This dumped Sven off the other side and exposed him to the predator. Based on the evidence at Sven's attack site, investigators estimate that he managed to fend the bear off for only about 10 seconds before being subdued. The only weapon found near Sven was his axe, which was lying on the ground a few feet from his corpse. Sven's remains were gathered and transported to the coroner for analysis. The bear's carcass was also taken to a laboratory for a necropsy. The bear was found to be a large male, in perfect health, and its stomach contained Sven's flesh. Regarding Sven's horse, there isn't any source indicating it was killed by the bear. I assume that it had escaped after the bear attacked Sven. Given the details presented, it must have been found with Sven's saddle askew, providing the reason the cowboy was knocked or thrown from it. But does that indicate he was thrown from his horse? In all of Canada, 380,000 black bears roam, with 120,000 to 150,000 of them in British Columbia. Nearly all of British Columbia is considered bear country, given this high population and dispersion. Between 1960 and 2014, 109 black bear attacks were reported in Canada, resulting in only 20 human fatalities. In the year 2022 alone, there were 26 bear attacks reported in Canada. Given bears are hibernating for about 5 months out of the year, it averages out to a little less than 4 attacks each month. It's not surprising that the bear that had killed Sven was a male. The statistics indicate that 88% of human fatalities due to bear attack are from bears exhibiting predatory behavior as opposed to defensive behavior. Of those attacks, 92% of the predatory bears were males, with 66% of those bears being adults. The conclusion of this analysis is that adult male black bears are about 90 times more likely to target humans as prey than sows. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I'm left with a few questions for you. Why are male bears more likely than female bears to predate on people? Given boars are more territorial, could they be defending their turf from a perceived invader? Would a firearm have made any difference in Sven's attack, or did his ambush happen too quickly to be prevented? Do you think the bear attacked Sven while he was on horseback, or was he thrown off beforehand? I'll gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.